And now I'm going to pass the baton. Here's my baton. To Tom Sudo from Ohio to take over as the new host. Thank you so much, and Chag Sameach to all. It's all yours, Tom.
Thank you, Rabbi. I got the baton. And it's my pleasure to introduce Dan Ornstein, who's in Albany, New York at Ohev Shalom. He's the author of the book, Cain versus Abel, a Jewish courtroom drama. And it's my pleasure to turn this section over to Rabbi Ornstein.
Thank you, Tom. Chag Sameach, everybody. I'm glad to be here with you tonight. We have so little time, and the topic that I'm going to talk about tonight with you is one that is actually quite expansive within Talmudic literature and within liturgy as well. Flow video folks, Zach, if you're on right now, if you could bring up my text, that would be terrific. I'd really appreciate that. That's wonderful. Thanks, Zach. I really appreciate it. Tom, thank you for the introduction. Folks, the name of my topic, which is actually based upon an article that I published a number of years ago, is kind of tongue-in-cheek. It's Angels in the Outhouse. You remember the great movie from the 90s, Angels in the Outfield. This is Angels in the Outhouse, the mystery and majesty of the blessing Asher Yatzar. Asher Yatzar is commonly known as the bathroom blessing. It's the blessing which, we Jews, of course, we have a blessing for everything, because everything is supposed to sort of, stir up in us a sense of what Rabbi Abraham Heschel of blessed memory called radical amazement, right? That sense of being amazed to the core, with a sense of deep wonder at the miraculousness of even the most commonplace things, which is really what the bracha, what every blessing is supposed to be about. It's supposed to be a way of helping us to express that sense of gratitude and wonder and awe and amazement. And it's also supposed to kind of, help us to cultivate those things, even in the most coarse and common experiences of our lives, including excretion, right? Eliminating things, waste from our bodies. And so the prayer has come to be known as the bathroom prayer. And as we'll see, of course, it's very much a blessing. It's what we call a birkat shevach, a blessing of praise, one of the categories or subcategories of brachot that are mentioned by Maimonides and by others in the different codes of Jewish law. And this particular blessing, Asher Yatzar, really focuses on the whole notion of the incredible miraculousness and elegance of the body, the fact that the body works at all, the fact that the body keeps what many of the medieval commentators call the ruach, right, the wind, the soul, inside of itself. And human beings are able to walk around and to live and to be alive. So we're going to look at the blessing, right, this bathroom blessing, which we say after our bodily functions. Zach, that's perfect. Thank you. But I want to do this tonight with you in the very limited time that we have. I want to look at the bracha with you. I want to talk a little bit about its context and its content in its most immediate context. But then we're going to talk about those angels in the outhouse. And for that, we're going to have to actually go into some of the early Talmudic sources where this blessing finds its sort of its first mention. So let's start with the blessing itself, and we'll talk a little bit about the bracha itself. Tom, by the way, you can hear me? Everything's good in terms of sound? Great. All right, wonderful. And then after we do that, I want to spend just a few minutes with you looking at the bracha itself, looking at the blessing itself. And I want to do that by reading it in Hebrew and reading it in English. And then we're going to jump straight from there to a couple of Talmudic passages, particularly a passage in Tractate Brachot, the very first of the tractates of both the Babylonian and the Jerusalem Talmud, that talks about Brachot. It talks about blessings and prayers and liturgy and all those other kinds of things. And we're going to look at the blessing in its context and find out about these angels that are mentioned in the Talmud that are connected with the blessing itself, and see if we can come up with even deeper, richer meanings for what this blessing is all about. Incidentally, if you'd like to see the article that I published, which is a much more extensive treatment what I'm talking about tonight, I know that Flow Media has a copy of it. I don't know if they can sort of, if you can sort of, send that to people. But if you let me know, I'll be happy through the Rabbinical Assembly to send that out to anybody who, emails me after Yom Tov privately to get a copy of the article. All right, let's go straight into the blessing itself. So let me start with the blessing in Hebrew, and then we'll go straight into the English as well. Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam, asher yatzar et ha'adam b'chokhmah, uvaravo nekavim nekavim, chalulim chalulim, galui v'yadua lifnei chisei chvodecha, she'im yipatech echad mehem, o yisatem echad mehem, אי אפשר להתקיים ולעמוד לפניך. Baruch atah Hashem, rofei chol basar, umafli la'asot. And Zach, if you want to just scroll up a little bit so we can see a little bit more of the English blessing that's in front of us, that's fine, that's fine. We'll just go to page 2 in just a moment. Here's the English, everybody. Praised are you, Yud He Vav He, Lord our God, ruler of the universe. You are the one who formed the human being with wisdom and who created within him, or by creating within him, openings upon openings, hollow organs upon hollow organs. It is revealed and known before the throne of your glory that should one of these be opened when it should be closed, or should one of these be closed when it should be opened, it would be impossible to survive and to stand before you. Praised are you, Yud He Vav He, Adonai, God, healer of all flesh, and wondrous creator of the human being. If ever there was a fine prayer poem, this is it, folks. Let's look, and Zach, if you want to just scroll down a little bit, we'll go back, actually scroll up, I'm sorry. We'll go back up towards the sort of the beginning of the English. Scroll up just a little bit. There you go. Let's look at this blessing for just a moment. Again, we're looking first at content in the immediate context of the blessing itself. We open with the standard blessing formula, Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam. We've all heard that, used it many, many times. We know it. That, we could have a whole class on that just by itself, those 6 words. But let's look at the content that's then attached to the blessing formula. This is a blessing in its immediate context that thanks God, right? That praises God for the incredible wisdom, both the wisdom of the human being, in other words, that our bodies are so wise and that they work so well, and for God's wisdom in creating human beings. And why? What is the wisdom specifically that we're praising God for? Now remember, this is a blessing that we say upon coming out of relieving ourselves, right? Coming out of the bathroom, right? We would think it's just a common course experience. Who wants to talk about that? But of course, this is Judaism, and Judaism wants to talk about that. It wants to see everything as being part of the great sacred creative process of God's creative power. And so what is it about the human being that is so wise? What is it about God's wisdom that's sort of, connected to human beings? The fact that we have openings upon openings. Listen to the sort of the language here, folks. Think about these openings in the body, right? Hollow organs in the body. One gets a sense of there's almost kind of an onomatopoeic quality, right? The idea of the onomatopoeia, it's something which sounds like, right? It's a word which is basically sort of the sound that it's trying to imitate or to express. Think about openings upon openings, hollow organs upon hollow organs. Nikavim, nikavim, chalulim, chalulim. There's a rhythm, there's a movement there, just as everything moves through the intestines, through the internal systems, through our arteries and veins, as blood pumps through, as food goes through, everything, right? There's this constant motion and movement, openings upon openings, hollow organs upon hollow organs. So first and foremost, this is a blessing praising God for the wisdom of the body and for God's wisdom in creating the body, specifically all the openings and ducts and all of the tubes that we have in our bodies. Then part 2, it sounds like a conversation that we have with God. Imagine we're standing before the throne of glory, right? I mean, the throne of glory is usually a symbol. The 6 times that it comes up in Talmudic literature, this phrase, it is revealed and known before the throne of your glory. Usually in each one of those instances, what the particular rabbinic writer is trying to say is we're about to share some kind of a mystery with God, some kind of a deep secret. We're standing before the throne of glory. And after we've praised God for the incredible elegance and wisdom of the body, what is it that we share with God? One of the deep, deep secrets of the world, that should one of those organs and hollow organs and tubes and openings be closed when it should be opened, in other words, when it malfunctions, and now Zach, go down. There you go. Or should one of those tubes, hollow organs, hollow openings, whatever, be closed when it should be opening, right? In other words, when something gets messed up sort of in the functioning of this elegant, wise thing called the body, it would be impossible to survive and to stand before you. In other words, what are we sharing with God? The recognition that this very body that is so wise, that it's a reflection of God's wisdom, is a body that can easily break down. Right? This is a sort of sharing of the great mystery, the great sort of secret, as it were, with God, of the fact that we're mortal, that we are both reflections of God's creative power and the amazing things that God does. And we also share with animals the fact, all other species, the fact that we break down, that the body breaks down, that ultimately we're mortal and that we don't always function the way that we should. And then we end the blessing with, this is called a bracha aruka, right? A long blessing, one that has an intro blessing formula, content, and then a sort of an outro, as it were, sort of a concluding blessing formula. What do we say to God? God, you're the healer of all flesh. In other words, the body corrects itself, right? This isn't about how, God is the sort of the mystical, doctor, so much as God puts into the body the capacity, the sort of, the structure, all of the scaffolding for the body's self-correction to keep us, healthy most of the time. And of course, we end with the fact that God is the wondrous creator of this very human being who is both an amazing reflection of God's wisdom, and also, amazingly subject to failure and to breakdown and to decrepitude and mortality like all other species. Now hold that idea, folks, this duality of the human, of the human project. Our bodies are both wise and reflections of the wisdom of God. And if I could really sit with you, I would show you how in the Hebrew, so much of the language of this blessing is reflective of the early stories of Genesis about God creating the world. So we are both very much reflections of the great divine wisdom of God, and also reflections of that which we share with all other species, which are all created by God as well. The fact that we are mortal, and the fact that sometimes these elegantly, wisely constructed bodies don't always work, and that ultimately they will break down and we will die, right? It's a confrontation with mortality that we're sharing with God here. Okay, that's the blessing itself. Let me check my time. All right, so now, Zach, this is what I'd like you to do, just to keep scrolling up. Let's go and let's take a look at where this blessing comes from. Now, folks, the sugya, right, the logical or literary unit of the Talmud that I'm presenting here is very long. I don't know if you'll all be able to, later on, be able to access all of this, but let me just give you a taste of it, because we really don't have a lot of time. Remember, the name of this particular session is Angels in the Outhouse. Somehow these angels come into the picture, and let's take a look at how they do. What we're about to look at, and we're not really going to read through all of them right now, is a series of what we call baraitot, which are Mishnah era, right, sort of the oral Torah era of, of rabbinic Judaism, Mishnah era passages that mostly didn't make it into the Mishnah, right? The Mishnah is the sort of officially canonized, edited book of great rabbinic traditions of oral Torah. These are all collected in the Talmudic commentary on a particular Mishnah in Tractate Brachot, and every one of them focuses on the idea of blessings and prayers that we say upon entering a place of danger and coming out of a place of danger. Okay? Physical danger. Sometimes it could also be moral danger. Now, again, I wish I could actually look at all of them with you. Maybe some other time we'll take the time to do it. But just, trust me that what Zach's about to scroll down ever so slowly is a series of these passages that all focus on this idea of prayers and blessings that we say upon entering a place of danger and coming out of a place of danger. And then finally, we get to our blessing. Let's take a look for just a second. And Zach, I'm going to have you stop. Not yet. Just go down a little, go up a little bit more. And hold on. And here we are. Okay, so now in the context of this particular passage of the Talmud that talks about blessings and prayers that we say upon entering places of danger and coming out of places of danger, we come to this whole matter of what happens when you go into a bathroom. Now, you have to understand, bathrooms of the ancient world were not, pretty well-tiled, well-lit places, okay? They were outhouses, and they were filthy, and they were often physically dangerous places. There were places with scorpions and rodents and all sorts of other things. They often were outside of cities. If you've gone to certain archaeological digs in Israel, you can see, like especially around Beit Sha'an, you can see where the public lavatories were. They were not pretty places by any stretch. But notice what this blessing, right, this Asher Yatzar blessing, right, which we just saw before, in the context of these passages about prayers that you say upon entering a place of danger and coming out of a place of danger, we're going to see now what the danger is that the Talmud seems to be alluding to, that for which it includes our blessing. All right, so Zach, if you just want to scroll up a little bit more. Here we go, right where we are at the bold, okay? Very good. Here we go. We're now going to look at one of these passages, and what do we see? We don't just see Asher Yatzar. We see what precedes it in the Talmud that is no longer there anymore. We no longer see what you're about to see here in the Talmudic passage. Okay, got cut out sometime in the Middle Ages. What's the passage? When one enters the bathroom, literally the throne room, Beit HaKisei is the Hebrew, okay? He recites, "Be honored, honored ones, celestial servants. Show honor to the God of Israel. Leave me alone while I enter here. Do what I desire, then return to you." So what does a person do when a person goes into an outhouse to relieve him or herself? That person addresses the two accompanying angels, which according to rabbinic tradition are always with a person wherever he goes or she goes. What is the person saying in this first passage? When a person enters the outhouse, the person says to the angels, "Leave me alone. I got to go here. I got to do what human beings do, this animal thing," right? That's implicit, of course. "Do what I desire, and then I return to you." And then Abaye says, right? Abaye, who of course is a later rabbi of the Babylonian Talmudic tradition, says, no, you shouldn't recite the prayer going into an outhouse this way, because maybe the ministering angels who accompany you will leave you there and abandon you, right? Because the angels see you literally in your nakedness and in your animal, animal state, and they'll say, what do we want to be hanging out with this human for, right? We thought this human was like us. He's in the image of God. He's created with all his wisdom. Maybe the angels will simply up and abandon you. They'll say, listen, so long, buddy. You're in your bathroom. You're in your outhouse. Do the animal things that you have to do. Do your bodily functions. We're not hanging around. Abaye says, this is what you should say. And watch the language here, folks. Guard me, guard me. Now, this is, of course, what are you doing? You're saying this before you go into the outhouse, before you go into the bathroom, and you're saying it to your accompanying angels. Guard me, help me, help me, support me, support me. In other words, angels, don't leave me. Wait for me until I enter here and return, right? Until I go in, do what I'm supposed to do, because this is the sort of the coarse physical animal side of who I am as a human being. Wait here until I do what I do, because guys, angels, this is the nature of human beings. Shekachi b'nei adam, right? This is derech b'nei adam. This is what human beings do. I'm partly angel, but really I'm an animal. And, and I need you angels to sort of hang out outside of the outhouse, wait until I'm done, and then I can restore myself to where I was with you, as a bipedal sort of, reflection of, of the divine image and all these other kinds of things. Okay, so remember, folks, we looked at the blessing. We just looked at the initial context of the blessing according to the Babylonian Talmud. And now, Zach, scroll down. What happens when you leave the bathroom? Here we go. This is the blessing that we know, that we just read. When you leave the bathroom, you say, praised are you, Lord our God, who formed the human being with wisdom, etc., 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 creating within, or creating, or by creating, openings upon openings, hollow organs upon hollow organs. In other words, thank you, God, for this incredible, this mysterious gift of our being able to wisely remove things from our bodies that maintain our lives. And then, of course, what do? We who were in the throne room, right? Remember the Beit HaKisei, which is the euphemism in Rabbinic Hebrew for a bathroom. We then come before the throne of God, right? I don't believe for a moment that these two images of throne were accidental, right? Here, the human being is telling the angels, stay away, stay outside. When I'm done doing the coarse physical animal things that human beings have to do, I'll return to you after I get off of the throne, and I'll come with you, right, restored back to my full human stature, with you, the angels, and we'll come back, and I'll share with God great gratitude and praise for what God has done for me by creating the body with wisdom, and also sharing with God that deepest of mysteries, which is that, yes, I am created in God's image and created at God's hand with all of these magnificent, wise openings and hollows and everything else. But having just come out of the throne room, I can share before God on God's throne of glory that the body will break down, that I am just as much physical, animal, material as I am spiritual, dignified, angelic. I'm both, right? I am this mixed bag of both the physical and the spiritual, the material and the supernal. That's what it means to be a true human being. That's what it means. And this blessing is really sort of telling us, we share this with the angels. We share this with God, both going into the so-called throne room, right? The bathroom, the outhouse. And then, of course, when we come out, restored back to the angels and to their accompaniment, and then, of course, restored before the throne of glory, and being able to say to God, we recognize the wisdom of this body you have given us. We recognize your wisdom in creating us, and we share with you, God, the greatest of all secrets, the greatest of all truths, that we are both the animal and the angel, right? The physical and the spiritual, that ultimately, for all of the wisdom and the wonder of our bodies, these very bodies are so precious and miraculous because they will not last forever, because there are times when the hollow organs and the openings break down and they don't work, right? Should one be closed when it should be open? Should one be open when it's closed? And we recognize that and we accept that fact. So this is a prayer, folks, that I really believe when you place it into its larger context of the Talmud itself, is not only talking about mortality and the recognition of how precious the body is, how finely tuned it is, how miraculous it is precisely because it could so easily break down. That's all true, right? We get that straight out of the content of the blessing itself. But when you place it in its larger context of where it comes from in the Talmud, as I just did with you, as I hope you saw, what you see is that this is a much, much richer prayer in the context, in the setting of a much, much richer dialogue between the human being and his or her angels. And again, you don't have to take the notion of angels literally to take it seriously, right? Angels are here in some respects symbolic for the spiritual dimension of a human being, right? That dialogue is a constant dialogue between us and our angelic side, between us and our bodies, between us and every other human being, and ultimately between us and God, right? This is a blessing which points us both towards the majesty and the mortality of being human, right? And if we can really see it as that, and we can sort of use it as a bracha, as a prayer of praise that helps us to have that conversation, imagining ourselves standing before God's throne of glory as we leave the so-called throne room, hopefully what it does is it helps us to deepen and to enrich our own sense that every aspect of our lives, right, is fraught with this tension between life and mortality, right? Between dignity and the loss of dignity, between the angelic and the physical or the animal. And that is our dance, right? That is our reality. That's our dynamic. And that is its own miracle and majesty given to us each and every day by God in each and everything that we do and that we experience as well. Tom, how much time do I have? Maybe 2 minutes left?
You've got about 5 minutes left.
Okay, so folks, in the 5 minutes, and unfortunately, obviously, I don't know who's watching us tonight. I wish we could have conversation, but maybe we'll have to do that some other time. I want to just throw out to you in the few minutes that we have left what I think this is for those of us who are rabbis, those of us who are caregivers, those of us who have been patients in the hospital, dealing with our own mortality, dealing with the breakdown of our bodies, dealing with healing and sort of with the power of the inherent healing power of the body, just as the blessing says at the very end. What do you do with a blessing like this? And what do you do with the fact that, we haven't, at least since probably the 11th or the 12th century, we haven't recited any of this stuff about the angels. You open up a Siddur, what do you have? You see the blessing Asher Yatzar. It's said in the morning, right, as part of the standard morning blessings, Birkot HaShachar, or you say it, if you're really very punctilious, or very, careful about it, you say it every time you come, out of the bathroom. I think that while it's unfortunate that sort of all of the angel language, which forms the setting, the context, the background in the Talmud of the Asher Yatzar blessing, well, it's sad that it's not there anymore, right? We're not sort of talking about that sort of, as it were, the angels in the outhouse, the rumor of angels, to quote the sociologist Peter Berger. Nonetheless, Asher Yatzar as a blessing, and I wouldn't even call it a blessing, I really call it a prayer poem, right? What this prayer poem is able to do, whenever we read it, however we use it, whether it's after healing from surgery, or after having dealt with some terrible illness, or going through an illness, or being at the bedside of somebody who's ill, or coming out of the bathroom, or whatever it is that we use the blessing for, if it can help us to understand Jewish spirituality, our own sort of existence with God deep within our bodies and our souls, as something which is really embodied, right? That's really what Judaism is. It's finding the spiritual, miraculous dimension of life, not in going out of the body, but in the everyday of the body. That's who we are as Jews. And that is a precious, precious spiritual and ultimately moral and ethical dimension of Judaism that I think can help us to, again, deepen and enrich our own sense of God's presence in our lives and our own sense of the miracle of the everyday of life as well. And I hope we can hold on to that. And I hope that, as we enter Shavuot and, we think about, more about the kind of, what Torah really is, to remember that embodiment, that sense of the body as being sort of the central sort of place where you can really find the mystery and the majesty of God, I think is a really wonderful and a really very, very beautiful thing.
Rabbi, thank you very much. Very informative. The one things we've read about the last several weeks in the Torah are things that we put in our body and things that come out of our body.
Yeah.
That makes us, tuma or not tuma. How does this factor into this prayer?
Well, it's interesting
because there's nothing that says in the Torah what you do.
Yeah. I mean, the whole notion of ritual impurity and ritual purity is so much caught up. Again, it's sort of the presence or absence of God around what? Around contact with death. That's really what sort of archetypal tuma is all about. It's really about the contact with death, right? A corpse, right? The body of somebody who has died is the archetypal form of that which can make you tameh. In other words, you in a body encounter a body that no longer possesses God's spirit, right? It was God's handiwork, but it's not God's spirit anymore, it's God. And so what does it do? That contact with death becomes a contact with the absence of God. And that's why you have to go through ritual purification to enter life again. So I think these themes of mortality, of life and death, it all kind of sort of fits together, right? Stuff about Tumah, those are complex and abstract rituals, sort of around this notion of the contact with death and mortality. But I think they really all come back to the notion of human beings in their bodies trying to find the life force and maintain that life force, which really is God's presence.
Rabbi, thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody. Hello, Rabbi Ain. Good to see you.
Good to see you too.
Chag Sameach, everybody.
And the beat goes on to our next session.